Phil, thanks for coming on the podcast. How we always start is a very brief introduction of yourself and the business that you're in, and then we'll take it from there.
Cool. No, thanks for having me. I'm Phil. I started JumpTech back in 2018. We're a software platform that utility companies, charger manufacturers, automotive and installers use for getting EV chargers, heat pumps, solar panels and battery storage installed.
Cool. Before we go into in more detail what the business does today, do you want to take us on a quick whistle-stop tour, if you like, of your career before starting the business?
Yeah, certainly. I go all the way back to university. I did a degree in agriculture because I couldn't get into the universities to do business studies. It was too competitive and I was too poor at my A-levels. And then went to a company in the Southwest, TH White Land Rover, and then the agricultural side of that business, working in marketing, strangely. And then when the dot-com boom started in 2000, I moved to Cambridge and joined some old school friends to do a dot-com startup, which we ran for 3.5, 4 years. Never got real funding for it because we started it just as a bubble burst. And had to gently, gracefully close that business down. After which I ended up at a company that had been acquired or got acquired. I was there actually by Nokia, selling mobile email. So this was in the day of BlackBerry and Nokia wanting to play in that space. So my job was selling mobile email into the mobile phone operators, initially across the Nordics and the Middle East, and then to Orange and Vodafone until 2009. So that was large enterprise, complex carrier sales, as we called it. And then in 2009, I started Qton, which is my first proper business after the dot-com attempt. And that then ended up, after about 2 years of doing all sorts of different things, loads of different software projects that we did and platforms that we tried, but ended up being a software platform for metering, for utilities metering. We had a customer that was an installer that had like 12 engineers to start with, doing gas installations, gas meter installations. And that business just grew and grew and grew because in that space, there wasn't anybody really providing good software, and ended up being a very widely used platform for the smart meter rollout, used by likes of National Grid, Scottish Power, Over Energy. And that business was acquired by SMS PLC in 2016. I managed 2 years of my own out, which is more than most people bet me was possible. And then in 2018, I left to start JumpTech. And the idea really came from me buying an EV in 2016 and then just recognizing that the process of having a charger installed was very annoying, frustrating, lots of paperwork, lots of admin. And then the experience and relationships that I had from the metering business were super relevant to that space. So it was an obvious thing to move into after.
Very good. And we'll come to present day soon. I guess the thing that sticks out then is that the first business that you tried out fails, then you go into like the corporate world, and then what makes you jump back into trying again, I guess, in your own business?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it was always in my blood anyway. I had a car washing business and hiring a couple of friends from school when I was 14. I was selling chicken eggs and duck eggs in Croydon when I was 12. So I think there's always a thing there where everyone always assumed that I was going to end up starting and running a business. And I think it's just in my DNA. And you know, that experience of doing that startup in the dot-com boom wasn't a bad one. It was just a huge amount of learning. I describe it as my kind of cheap MBA, if you like. And you know, I think that, and I could see that so many things that I'd done then I would do differently now. So I was keen to use that experience as well.
Cool. Okay. We'll touch on the second business then that we just mentioned. Most people that I've had on the podcast start the business, they're doing absolutely everything themselves, and then they start to bring in people to take things off of them. With the industry that you were in, do you have people straight away, or are you in the same situation of you have to do everything basically?
I can't write a line of code. Well, maybe a bit of HTML at a push. So I always needed people around to do the software development. I've also got a pretty poor attention span when it comes to lots of repetitive detail work as well. So very early on at Qton, my previous business, yeah, I hired somebody to look after all that stuff, the finance stuff, the HR stuff, and the admin side, and then hired software developers who were friends or could work on a contract basis to start with until we got off the ground. So my role was basically a sales role.
Okay.
And so I think I'm fortunate that I couldn't do those other things very well or easily. So it necessitated me going and finding people who could do the stuff that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, and I guess the things that you're good at are harder to get off your plate as well. So the the sales role that drives the business forward, whereas the software stuff is like product development and stuff like that doesn't really move the business in terms of like revenue. Whereas if you can get your hands dirty in the sales stuff, then that's constantly driving the business forward, and you're not in a rush to get that off your plate and bring somebody else in to take that off your view.
Yeah, I never did actually.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a thing about founder-led sales where a founder can sell in a very different way to anybody. I think it comes with that advantage, so it makes sense to leverage it. When you sit in front of a potential customer and say, "This is what we're going to do," they believe you much more if you're a founder than if you're a sales guy who's on some commission plan or something. So for me, for that business, yeah, I never hired a salesperson, and
Right.
I just always did it myself.
Wow. Okay. Would you do you mind? Can you share like what you got that business to revenue wise?
Um, and I think it's a matter of public record, actually. I think it was about 1.4 million revenue,
Nice.
most of which was recurring. So
Yeah.
yeah, and we were about 25 people. Um, we grew that organically, so we had zero investment, external investment, um, which was brutal, but I think it's really, really healthy process to go through. And I was fortunate, because I always think there's so much luck involved in all of these things, to have a really good exit. Um, not having had to take external investment in, always retain control of it. So yeah, for me, that I look back on it and just go, everything fell into place very well for me. I was super fortunate with that. So
Good stuff. We will come back. We'll come to sort of present day then in the new business. You say that you found it basically spotting a gap in the market, which is what most businesses come off the back of. Previous business is like you starting everything and getting some people in to help you out with the software stuff. How does this business start in terms of, I would guess that you have a bit more capital behind you to be able to get things moving quicker. What are some of the first things that you do to put in place to say, right, this is the business that we're going for. We've obviously got to build the software first. How was that process sped up? I like from the first time.
um, yeah, I mean, I guess I said in my mind, I think that if you're starting a business, if you look at the odds of a business being successful, it's pretty shocking, right? It's super high risk thing to go through. So I guess there's a couple of things. One, yeah, I agree with your point in the gap in the market, but probably more about a personal pain that I
Yeah.
found frustrating. So, and the other, but the main thing I wanted that I looked at was like, if I'm going to start another business, how can I make sure that I have an unfair advantage over somebody else who maybe have the same idea at the same time? And as you said, I was fortunate I have some capital behind me from the sale of the previous business. But more importantly and more valuable is I had a team that wanted to work with me again, that had built something very similar,
Right.
that spent years trying to tackle technical debt and past mistakes and learnings and all those kind of things. And then the third thing is all the relationships and contacts. I could just pick up the phone to senior people at energy companies, installers, go and meet with them, test the market, get their sense on it, and get a very good idea of the viability of the idea in the business. So I think those three things were the main things. But I started in a very similar way. In fact, my first employee was the same guy, James. but this time I was able to hire him rather than just pay him a day rate. And then as I could afford it, bringing other members of the team across into the business.
It's like it really is like getting the band back together. Then
Yeah, it is. It was very much like that. In fact, I did get. I think it's. I'm trying to think about what I need to be careful what I say, but I did get emails from members of the team saying, "Please let me know when I can come." And I'm just like, it's difficult. Okay, how little do I need to earn before you can bring me in?
right.
So yeah, very much so.
Do you want to take us through then pretty much a full rundown of what the business does, who it serves, and who you're working with?
Yeah, I'll try and give you a relatively short version because it can take a while to go into all the detail. But effectively, I guess when I started the business, we started by selling to installers. So the intention was, how do you make it easy for an installer to do an installation of EV charge point? Particularly at that point was where we were focused. And that was about a home survey. That was about notifying the electricity networks of the install. That was about load calculations, grant applications, all that stuff. We very rapidly got to learn and know inside out. And so we could give them bespoke software that was designed exactly and specifically for installing EV chargers. When I started the business, I knew from my previous business that it's all very well having a field service management platform that installers use, but actually, generally, they're receiving work from a third party who's owning the customer and wanting to give them the fulfillment work to do the install. And those guys actually want some control and visibility over the customer journey and experience, and to know what's going on if a customer calls them. So when we, at the previous business at Qton, it was a real pain trying to aggregate that data in the right way and to provide it in the right way for National Grid and Scottish Power and OVO with all the data. So we learned from that and so architected this platform where those energy companies could design their own customer journey and own experience, and then that would sit on the installer's platform as a workflow, and then they could have complete visibility over it. So initially we sold to installers, got to learn the industry, got to learn the pain points, got familiar with the lingo and everything. And they used the platform to scale their business, and we signed up, the majority of the kind of large installers in the UK, and many others. And then we went to charge point manufacturers. At the time, that was the likes of BP ChargeMaster and Easy and Sync EV and ZapTech. And they used our platform to manage their customer journey from the website or from automotive partners through to the installers on our network. So effectively, we end up with an ecosystem of installers and companies who want to get chargers installed. As that market develops, it moved from more charger manufacturers to energy companies. So, we already had the likes of OVO on our platform, but then we also signed up Scottish Power and the likes of EDF as well. And those organizations said, look, they absolutely love the platform. It gives them visibility and control over subcontracted work, which was otherwise just going into a black box. And so they pushed us down other work streams, which were in line with our purpose around electrification. So they just did it sooner than we would have maybe chosen. But with hindsight, it was a good thing. So we started doing solar and then battery storage and heat pumps. So today we have those energy companies using a variety of those workflows for EV heat, solar and battery storage. At the same time as that was happening, I was getting leads coming in from abroad, which wasn't my expectation. There was a reason we originally jumptech.co.uk. I didn't really have a vision bigger than that, if I'm completely honest. And then started selling to organizations in the Netherlands, Germany, Australia, and then also saw the opportunity in the US as well. So it took on a life of its own, and we didn't see anybody else doing exactly what we were doing. So we thought, actually, we should give it a go.
I was going to bring that point up actually. So it's basically a new product to the market, and I had a conversation with another founder that was in this situation where you've basically got no competitors, which is brilliant, but also at the same time you have to then educate people about the product and why they should use you.
Very, very expensive.
Right.
Trailblazing and creating a new category, if you like.
Yeah.
We're not a CRM, we're not an ERP. Is really expensive, and if I'm honest, I think it's you're far better off being a fast follower. It's much better positioned to be as a business in some respects, depending on the lie of the land and depending on the critical mass that you need for these things. But
Yeah.
I'm never complacent about our position in the market. I would say we are market leaders for what we do. No one's doing what we're doing at anything like our scale. But actually, and particularly with AI, somebody who's wanting to come after us can see what's worked and what hasn't, and doesn't have to go through all that learning, doesn't have to go through the education and explain where we fit in the market. We recently saw someone who's competing with a part of what we do, basically replicating our language. In fact, I've seen that consistently. So yeah, it's tough, creating that category, defining that category, defining the language. And then on top of that, the whole industry is defining its own language and trying to work out what the terminology needs to be for different things and what the partnerships are and what works and what doesn't, because it's such a nascent market. And EV grew very fast and then kind of slowed down. And in that time, the language was being established and the partnerships were being established, and but everything was moving. So yeah, it's tough.
How do you get into the companies that you mentioned? Like, yeah, you've got your strong contact list, but people outside of there, was it a case of service the people that we know and get a real good name for ourselves and do a good job there, and then we can start to go into the people that we don't know, like the cold leads, if you like? Or was it a mixture of let's do the people that we know and then also start to educate the other side?
It was a mix.
Yeah.
But our very first customer, it was called the Phoenix Works at the time, was cold. It was me just hitting LinkedIn, got a message from some guy saying, "Oh, you don't want to work with this company. They're super dodgy. I've just left, but this is the guy you need to speak to at this company." I said, "Can you make an intro?" He did an intro, and that became our first customer. Right. It was just a door opening exercise, cold, and doing my best to use, the story of the previous business as a reason why it would be successful, which I think was a factor for them agreeing to speak to me and to consider working with us. So, this was in 2018, where EV was still uncertain if it was even going to take off or not. And being able to say, "Oh, I built and sold a business that built a platform for the smart meter rollout," is like, okay, that sounds credible. It sounds like you might know what you're doing. So I think I was able to use that in my language. But yeah, all the installers we signed up at the beginning, they were all unknown to me. And then some of the energy companies and other relationships I was able to bring in later.
Did you carry on being the only salesperson, or have you got people in now?
We have a team now. So yeah, I mean, this is a very different journey, where, we've taken external funding. We have 2 VCs who are super supportive, who invested beginning of February last year. And yeah, we've grown the sales team in the UK. We have a sales guy in Germany, and then we have a team in the US as well. So yeah, that was something I couldn't continue to do.
Okay, that's interesting then, because you said that the first or the previous company, no funding, just sort of done it all yourself, which was the right decision at the time, because then you've got the whole exit, if you like, to yourself. What's the reason for taking funding on this one, and how does it differ? I guess you've got other pressures that come along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a hobby horse of mine. I think there's a tendency for startups to think, "Oh, I've got an idea, I need to go and raise some money," which I think is not generally very healthy. I think it's like, you've got an idea, test it, don't go on holiday, sell your car, like just test it and try and find out organically if it works or not, as cheap as you possibly can, and then try and create some value around that. And so I've always been maybe discouraging people from looking at funding straight away, or even not really testing whether or not it's necessary. So I'm certainly not one of those believers and advocates of jumping straight in and saying, "Oh, let's go and raise some money because I've got an idea." I think in my mind anyway, the reason for receiving and going after external funding is purely about pace. So if you believe that the market is going to move faster than you can, and you might lose, then you basically end up in a position, well, either you're going to end up with everything or nothing. Obviously not literally, but to be able to capture a decent percentage of the market, you need to move faster. Then you need to raise money, and then you can do that. Otherwise, why not just grow organically? Because you'll learn more. It's the things that it's generally a healthier way. And so back, when we took our first round 3.5 years ago, I think it was, there's a lot of buzz behind EV. Everything was moving super fast. I could see some potential competitors emerging. We could see the opportunity for expanding internationally. And we just couldn't see how we could do that organically. And particularly, to try and tackle the US market with the funds from organic growth in the UK would have been impossible. So it was really about, believing that we needed to move faster than we could if we just grew organically.
Okay, very good. So the first funding was just over 3 years ago. And now, when does the expansion start? So you mentioned that you start to get some inbound leads from international or different places outside the UK. When does that start?
When did those leads start coming in?
Yeah.
Oh, they started coming in like 2020,
Right.
like very early on, which was a real surprise to me. So we serviced them for a while, but I think it was recognizing the opportunity in the US that was the instigator for saying, actually, we should go and raise money to be able to go and tackle that market.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned a bit on AI, and especially on the software side of it, in terms of like people being able to build competitors to you. Do you? I guess it'd be interesting to hear thoughts on like how you're integrating AI into the business, or how you see it maybe changing some of how the industry works. I don't know if you've got anything to share with us on, especially like, it's been really interesting how people are using it inside of businesses. So I don't know if you've got anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, we have I think it's a fortnightly call where people can join just to chat about how they're using it for different things. And then we have a Slack channel dedicated to
Right.
like, learnings,
Yeah.
different tools that are working. And yeah, it's used obviously in a very, very wide range of ways. So sales and marketing use it very differently from the developers to the product guys. And so yeah, internally, we should all be using it to make our days faster and more efficient. It's my go-to over Google, unless it's something really simple. Aware of the increased carbon footprint of ChatGPT over a Google search. And then I think we also obviously use it for recording our calls for our customer success teams and things. So we've got a good summary of those meetings. And then yeah, increasingly looking at how we can use it in the product. Give an example where we were looking at doing integration with a customer, with somebody who was providing jobs to a lot of our installers, and they were just sending an email with a PDF attached. So we're like, oh, we need to do an integration with that company. Whereas now, actually, you could just put Zapier listening to an inbox, take the PDF, ask AI to extract the images and the data and put it into a project in the platform. So suddenly you don't actually even need an integration, because you can just do those things intelligently that way. So yeah, we see lots of opportunity where we can move faster, be more flexible, do less development than we would otherwise.
Cool. And in terms of maybe not anything to do with AI, where do you see what's next for the business, and I guess for the industry now? It's it's picking up pace again, if you like, and becoming, well, I guess it's going to grow and grow and grow. What's next for the business and the industry?
I think there's a few things. One of the key things we do is we take the customer journey from the car dealership right the way through to the installer.
Right.
And the reason that's important is because for the car manufacturers, having a charger installed is just a risk for those guys, right? The stats on dissatisfied customers after buying an EV and the number of those that were caused by the installation are just mind-blowing. So we can protect that through the workflows and the visibility that we provide to the automotive OEMs. And we've just done a partnership with Affinity EV where we can integrate into the dealer management system. So pull that data straight out without the sales guy in the showroom having to do anything, and then being really able to streamline that journey. What we're seeing is automotive guys partnering with energy companies. This is where we believe the industry is going to continue to grow and go. And I believe that actually those won't be exclusive relationships ultimately. You'll be able to go in and buy a BMW and they'll say, well, this is the charger you get from OVO, this is the charger you get from Scottish Power, this is the charger that you get from EDF, and then our platform can manage that customer journey, but it will just be seamless. So that linking the automotive guys with the energy companies, I think, is increasingly important. Once someone buys an EV, they become aware of what a kilowatt hour is, and then they want to understand about buying solar. Like 40% or something of people within 6 months of buying an EV are inquiring about having solar installed,
Right.
which makes complete sense. It's a bit of a gateway drug, an EV, around electrification. So that's one area. The other thing that we see in the stuff that's super exciting is around V2G, so vehicle to grid charging. I've got a couple of EVs. I don't really want to have to pay to have a battery installed at home when I've got a load of batteries sat on my driveway already. So the ability for bidirectional charging, being able to power the house from the cars during peak times, and then arbitrage, trade the energy from my car to the grid when it's expensive, is going to be really exciting. It's coming. It's a bit chicken and egg around, does the inverter sit in the car? Does it sit in the charger? I think it's moving towards the car, so the charger can just be AC. And I think then you'll actually see companies subsidizing their cars and the leases based on the utilization of the battery to balance the grid. And this solves the challenge of the peaky renewable grid. So sunshine, wind. How do you level the grid? The answer is EVs do bidirectional charging. So they're actually a big part of the solution, not the problem, which is the common misconception.
Is there anything else that you want to cover in terms of like the business and what it's doing now?
I think one of the interesting areas is I've always been very passionate about business culture. And we introduced a color insights practitioner to support us in the business and did a session on color insights. So effectively psychometrically profiling the team based on, and then you end up with a primary and a secondary color. Of course, you're a mix of all four, so but red, green, blue, and yellow. And it's been the most powerful thing from a cultural perspective that we've done, because we've intentionally encouraged it, but it's entered the vernacular, so it's talked about every day. So
Right.
we know that blues need all the detail. I mean, they'll have a list of all the bullet points after a meeting and a spreadsheet with all the actions. They know that the reds are just going to want 3 bullet points, and if you just get on with it. And I know the yellows just want to go and have a party, and I know that the greens are going to be worried if everyone's okay or not. So we understand the different colors. Everybody in the business pretty much knows what color everyone else is. And we also know what color our customers are. And it's been very powerful. I remember the practitioner saying to me, Phil, what's the main thing that you want to get out of it? Like, why do you want to do this? And for me, it was about empathy between roles. How can you help everyone understand that the way they see things is different from the way that someone else sees them, but both are valuable? And so we know that we need the yellows on the calls to create the energy and to, make everything happen and make it fun. But we also know if we haven't got the blues there, documenting things and making sure processes in place, that everything will fall apart. So we always have to have that balance of the colors. And we also know that as a business, we're skewed heavily to blue and green. There's very few reds. There's even fewer yellows in the business. And so we can also look at, when we're hiring, what other colors might be help redress the balance as well.
Does that come from? Is that like a lesson from the previous business in like how important team is, and something that you brought in straight away, or was it something else that triggered it?
I think it comes back. I remember my coach in my previous business saying to me, so like 2010, saying, I've never met somebody who's so passionate about the culture in the business. And I think back in 2010, it wasn't really talked about like it is now. It wasn't really, it hadn't become on vogue. It wasn't in the sort of general consciousness. So, but I think that came from the fact that I really hated school. So I had a view of like, I've got a very low tolerance for people not enjoying their jobs. How do you make it a place where people can really enjoy what they do? And if they don't, then either they're in the wrong job or they're in the wrong company. And so that's something that's always been just very front of mind for me. And so I think part of creating an environment that's fun place to go to work, if people are happy enjoying what they're doing, you're going to be more productive. It's going to be a nicer place to be, the amount of time you spend at work, etc. And so, and then especially as you're scaling, it's super hard to maintain that. How do you make sure, and you're remote as well. We're a remote first business. We're around 55 people spread across all over the UK, across Germany and North America. We need different tools, different ways. And we recently had a session with our coach on what stresses the different colors. So what makes a red stressed, what makes a blue stressed, a green and a yellow stressed, and how different those things are. And then recognizing those things in other team members. And then it gives us much more empathy to where they're at and understand how to communicate with them as well. So it's been really powerful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something that a lot of people have spoken about on the podcast that I've done previously. But it has come up a few times of how you get the balance of being a really good place to work and people enjoy coming, and then also demand getting high performance and yes, it's like a mix of showing that you're a nice person and demanding high results. Basically, you need the work to be done. Is that something that you struggle to get a balance with, or have you been pretty good at that?
No, I think that's always a difficult balance to strike. We put a lot of thought into our company values a couple of years ago, and I think we did a pretty good job with them. And I mean, we've had to refine how they're implemented and how they're defined. Personal growth is number one, and that's just because I believe if you're growing, then you're going to feel more fulfilled, and that's going to keep you motivated. Number two was be human, so that's very much the empathy piece. Make sure you're, be willing to be humble, be willing to admit your mistakes, and be a safe place to work. And then the third one was just had a little bit more edge to it, really, which was own it. So this is about, you need to know that if someone's looking after something, it's going to get taken care of. It doesn't mean they need to do it. They might have to reach out to 30 people to make it happen, but they're going to take responsibility for it. So we've found that those three values have actually they've passed the test well over the last couple of years around retaining that balance of growth, being human, that empathy piece, but also that we've got a load of stuff we need to get done and that kind of urgency that needs to go with it. So.
Yeah, that was a much better way of describing that empathy and getting stuff done rather than what I was trying to do. We're pushing for time, so we'll start to wrap up. But if people are interested, I'm not sure if you share any of that company value stuff and the behind the curtain look, if you like, or if people are interested in seeing what the business does, where can they find all of that?
Best place is LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. I think I did a post recently on that session we just did on the stresses associated with color insights as well. So there tends to be a lot of activity on LinkedIn from the company, and quite a lot of it is culture focused as well. So
cool. I'll post all of the your personal LinkedIn and company LinkedIn in the description. But Phil, thanks for sharing that with us. It's been a different one in terms of somebody that's had an exit and then started again. So that's been a real good insight into how that looks. And interested to see how the expansion goes into international. I know it's already started, but I'll definitely be keeping a lookout for that.
Cool. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Cool.